Chevra, how are you? It's now Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Shemini, Parshas Porah, and Shabbos Mevarchim Chodesh Nisan. A lot of things coming together, and we'll try to make some connections. But first, as usual, first of all, I hope everyone is gesund, stark, and freilich, begashmis and beruchnis. Healthy, strong, and happy, physically and spiritually. As usual, we'll start with a prayer. This is from Tilim, Kapitel Amar Aleph, Posik Tes. V'lo yizgatani biyad oyev, hemalto v'merchov ragloi. Which means, you have not delivered me into the hand of the enemy. And we'll interpret this to mean, begashmis, if they're Yidden that are now fugitives, refugees, running for their life. Or beruchnis, that's the main thing. We have Yetzer Hara, and we thank the Eibishter all the time. Baruch Hashem, we didn't fall into the clutches of your Nefesh HaBahamis. And Hemadato v'merchov ragloi. Baruch Hashem, with Torah, in l'cha ben choyn el misha yisik b'Torah. A Jew learns Torah, has merchav, he has spaciousness, his feet are firmly planted on the ground, he has solid foundations, but he's broad. He's not limited from the limitations of his Nefesh HaBahamis. Now, first of all, I want to say a word, which I hope is correct. A moiridik word. There's a famous Torah that said in the name of the Mizitcha Magid, one way, as far as I've seen, and it said in the name of the Alter Rebbe in a different way, similar. It's really the same point. It's about Shemini Atzeres. And the Magid said that Shemini Atzeres is Mloshin Shemini 8, is Mloshin Shomein, fat, the fats, that's like the juiciest part. Shemini Atzeres is like the juiciest part of the whole Tishrei. The Alter Rebbe said Shemini Atzeres is the essentia. He said those words, the essence of the whole Tishrei is Shemini Atzeres. So, Ulai yesh leimar, and this will give us a whole new chayis in Pasha Shemini. Pasha Shemini is the Shomein of Torah. It's the real smetne, gedicht, the good juicy part. And al derech zeh, the word of the Alter Rebbe, Pasha Shemini, you could say maybe, is the essentia, the essence of the whole Torah. Now, how are we going to learn Pshat? So that gives you material for many, many ideas. Is it the word that we learned the story from Nadav Avihu, that the main point is to be involved in the world? Is it about the simonim of kashrus, what we're allowed to eat, what we're not allowed to eat, and how we go about it? So there's many different ways how to learn Pshat. How do we see in this week's Parsha the principles that are most fundamental of the entire Torah? So, I'd like to talk about one object, which I think is not stressed enough in our Dalet Amis, and that is, we'll show how it is in this week's Parsha, but also in different places in the Torah, how it comes first and foremost. And for some reason, I personally feel that it's not spoken about enough. So in this week's Parsha, where it talks about the kosher animals and the non-kosher animals, what's fit for consumption, etc. So in the end, it gets to what's called the creepy crawlies, the insects, the lizards, things like that. And the Posuk, in Kapitel Yud Aleph, Posuk Membei, says, Kol hoylech al gochoin, all that goes on its belly, v'chol hoylech al arba, and all that walks on 4 legs, ad kol marbe raglayim, up to those with numerous legs, l'chol hasheretz hasheretz al haaretz, lo yisochlum ki sheketz heim. Among all the creeping things that creep upon the earth, you may not eat them, for they are an abomination. So, there's a Sikha of the Rebbe, Chelik Yud Zayin, where the Rebbe says a Rashi Sikha on the Rashi, which I'm going to read you now, the Rashi, but what I'm going to say today is all mainly about the lesson in Avodas Hashem. Rashi says, Hoylech al gochoin. What does it mean, Hoylech al gochoin? Something that goes on its belly, Zen nochosh. This is a snake. Or shein gochain, the term gochain means shchia, bending low. Shehoilech shach, for it goes bent low. V'noifel al and it falling on its stomach. V'noifel al mayav. Okay. Anyway, so the Rebbe brings the rest of the Rashis over here that say that it also includes the scorpion and includes worms, etc. So the Rebbe asks a question like, why couldn't the pasuk say clearly, what we're referring to, like it says concerning many other animals? Why does the pasuk mention this point, kol hoilech al gochi? Now, to make it even more stronger, this idea, guess what? There's something very interesting over here. On the word gochain, there's a big vav. And the Gemara brings out that those seifrim, the people that counted the letters of the Torah, they liked it. Seifrim means they made lists. They made simonim, there's 39 meloches, like you say, Aser Sadibris, you'd given me the shaten and dreshet them. So there were people that were into counting. And they counted, and this letter, vav, of gochain, is the exact center of the entire Torah. Torah Shabbat, the Chamisha Torah. So, in a way, that should draw your attention to it. Just like we have all these things that we learn from the ayin of Shema, there's a big ayin, echod, there's a big daled, there's the small aleph of Vayikra. So wherever there's asun ravrivin, which means big letters, that means it's something that demands our attention. So over here too, in addition to what the Rebbe is asking about, that why does we say gochen, why can't we just say the animals instead of something that goes on the belly? This that the Torah writes the word gochen with a big vav, it's like when you're reading a book and they say in the underline red marker and say, pay attention, this is very important. Do I have your attention? There's a very big message here. So the Rebbe answers that in Avodah, the reason why Rashi says it like that first he says that you bent down and then you fall in your stomach, is because he's giving us a lesson about life. How we deal with our evil inclination, with our Yetzer Hara and Nefesh Ba'amis. But it means in general your better self or your lazy self. You want to be successful? You have to remember one thing. Be on guard. Why? What does it mean? How does it work? So the Rebbe brings the Maimer Azal, which says, Kachim nosi shel Yetzer Hara. This is the way the Yetzer Hara works. Hayoy Maimer Leah say Kach. Today he tells you to do this. Tomorrow he tells you to do that. Until it tells you to go serve Avodah Zarah. So what does it mean? What's this message? So this message is a phenomenal, profound message on many levels. Number one, the message is, guess what? It explains something. And that is, many people, they look at themselves at a certain point in life and they ask themselves, how did I get here? How did this happen? Etc. And the answer is, it wasn't one step. It was many steps. And that's what the Maimer Azal tells you. Hayoim, today, how is it all going to start? Say kach. Why? Why does it take many steps? Because unbelievably so, the Eibishter made a Jew that his Nefesh HaBahamis is mild-mannered. Baruch Hashem, the Eibishter made a Yid, his Nefesh HaBahamis is ganz edel. Even the side of him that wants to do what's not always the right and proper thing, that not right and proper thing that he wants to do is not so bad after all, really, in a way. As the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, chapter 8, that he calls the Nefesh HaBahamis of a Yid, Shedmi Hudayin. It's a Jewish Nefesh HaBahamis, which means it's pretty mild-mannered. And as the Alter Rebbe says there, that naturally he's only drawn to things of Klippas Neiga, which is not so bad. I can't elaborate now on the scope of this year to get into the details. Now let's get back to the Maimer Azal. There are Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe where he says, you know how the Nefesh HaBahamis starts? Hayoy Maimer say kach. He says, do it. But how does he say do it? Kach, my way. So let's say it says in Shulchan Aruch, if you have to, Maiv the Sedre, you say twice the Psukim and then once the Targum, yeah? You're going to say, no, I don't want to do it that way. It's too long. I'll just read twice the whole Chumash, without saying Targum, and then I'll do once Targum. It'll take me much quicker. Guess what? That's what the Maimer Zal means. Hayoim, Kach, he says, be Maiver the Sedre. But be Maiver the Sedre the way I want you to be Maiver the Sedre, not the way that it says in the Shulchan Aruch. Once you give in into the Nefesh Bahamas for this, then it gets worse. He sees he was successful with this millimeter. Next day, he takes an inch. Next day, it takes 2 inches. Which the oimik, the depth and profundity of this Maimer Zal is, you know why? He says, today do this, tomorrow he says that, until he tells you to serve Avodah Zarah. So if you learn Pshat Stamazai, Alpinigla, you think that the truth is the Yetzer Hara wanted you to serve Avodah Zarah in the first place, straight away. But he knows you're not going to listen to it, so he starts for small things, but really his plan all along was to get you to there. According to Chassidus, it's not necessarily so. He didn't even dream of something so separating from Hashem, something so drastic or radical in the negative sense. Why? Because he's more refined. Because you're a Jew. And it's the total opposite of a Jew. It's like saying, could you imagine convincing a human that he's a monkey? That's pretty out of the question. I can convince him of other things. But to convince him that he's a monkey, same thing over here. To convince a Jew to serve Avodah Zarah, it's completely against his nature. There's no way I'll be successful. Not only that, there's no way that even the Nefesh Bahamas thinks like that. What happens? You give in. So you yourself corrupted your Nefesh Bahamas. He started with Kach. You gave in to him, he got more chutzpah. And this I heard from the Rebbe many times. I'm ready to give shot in the words. Al chet shechatonu lefanecha b'Yetzer Hara. We say in Yom Kippur, Al chet, that we sinned with our Yetzer Hara. Klotz kasha. What kind of sin is the sin that I did with my Yetzer Hara? Every sin I did with my Yetzer Hara. So every sin I did with my Yetzer Hara. What kind of specific sin is there? What kind of specific Al chet am I saying shechatonu lefanecha b'Yetzer Hara? And the Rebbe said, I'm ready to give shot. Because the truth is, we corrupted the Yetzer Hara. That's right. The Eibishter gave you Yetzer Hara. Mitzad the way the Eibishter gave it to you, it was pretty refined, pretty delicate, not so coarse, not so crass, not so mean, etc. But because you gave into it so many times, you made it worse than the way the Eibishter gave it to you. And that's right. Because you gave into it, therefore you corrupted it, you perverted it, you made it worse. Now, and that's what the Rebbe learned Pshat in the Rashi, when we say about the snake, that it starts off with bending low. Now, bending low can mean many things. The Rebbe says Pshat, bending low means that he doesn't have Jewish pride. Instead of being, going Yaakov and being happy, wearing your tzitzis out, having a full beard, having a yarmulke, you're always apologetic. You're embarrassed. You have insecurities about your Judaism. This is a subject which I believe today is something we really have to talk about a lot, but not now. So that's where it starts from. You're really, really not proud of what it means to be a Jew. You're scared about how the world will relate to something that comes from the Torah or religion, and therefore you try to dilute it. You try to hide it. But the problem is that you yourself have these doubts. You yourself have some of these feelings. And then once it starts with that your head is bent low, which also means that it's not su'umarim enechem. You're not always looking to what's above you. You're not always thinking about your purpose and your mission. You're a yid in this world. And you're meant to elevate the world and remain a bit above it. And being attached to a higher cause. So you don't have the su'umarim enechem. And you're going bent low. So what happens as a result of that? Neifel al meyav, you fall on your stomach. That's it. You completely become immersed in materialism. You become completely immersed in a hedonistic lifestyle. You're completely one with artzius. You're just going on your belly. There's no sense of anything higher. Now, we see this in a way, which I mentioned this before. I find this astonishing, that the first question Alter Rebbe asks in Tanya, which Seder and Torah is also Torah, the order of Torah is also order, that means that that's monumental, it's epic. So everyone knows that the first question that's asked in Tanya is, even if the whole world says that you're righteous, you have to be in your eyes like someone who is wicked. Why? You're going to be depressed, you're not going to be able to serve the Eibishter with joy. Why should you think you're wicked? That's the main question Alter Rebbe asks over there. We're dealing with a person who not one person has a bad word to say about him. It's a double ribui. Kol ha'elam kulei, which means it's not rubai kik kulei, it's rubai. I'm sorry, it's kulei mamish. Every single person who is bar none has anything bad to say about you. No, feel bad about yourself. You're wicked. So the Alter Rebbe answers in chapter 13. He answers this question that he introduced, the first question of the entire Torah Shebechsav Chassidus. He answered in chapter 13, even though he begins with this question, that what I mean to say is, what do we see the Maimon Azal? Don't consider yourself wicked. Consider yourself similar, as, like wicked. Meaning to say, you have an animal in you. You have a condition. And you're drawn to certain things. You have tendencies. You have inclinations. It's not your fault. The Eibishter created you that way. And that's your mission in life. You have a sparring partner, which is pulling in the other direction to make you better, to make you stronger, to make you sharper, to make you higher. But it's there. Always remember that. And that's what Alter Rebbe answers to this question. And I believe that this is so epic concerning how a Jew is going to stay connected to Hashem. That means this is one of the main points of the whole Tanya. The Beinoni has to be aware of the truth of his condition. I think I said this before. Imagine you go to the doctor, and the doctor tells him, if you continue living this lifestyle, eating salt and sugar and oil, whatever, you're not going to live long. Therefore, you're going to have to modify your whole lifestyle. So if you're immature, you say, Doctor, I thought you were my friend. I'm so upset. But if you're a mature person, you say, Doctor, I'm so happy. You saved my life. Because he's telling you, you have a condition. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya tells you, you have a heart condition that involves a nefesh habahamis. Now you're mature about it. So you're on guard, and you make sure to try to make the right decisions from your nefesh halikis. It's not a problem. We're all in the same boat. We all have this heart condition. But be mature, be honest, and know the truth about yourself. Then you'll live long, and you'll have a happy life. And that's the way you'll stay a Beinoni. And that's how the Alter Rebbe learns Pshat. What it means, Yehei Beinecha Kirosha, he means Beinoni. It's as if the Maimon Azal would say, even if the whole world says you're a tzaddik, Yehei Beinecha Beinoni. Understand that you're going to have a struggle your whole life. There's going to be a side in you that says, be lazy. There's going to be a side in you that says, take a shortcut. That side is always going to be there. So be aware of that, etc. Now, I was thinking to myself, so look, we have the Vav of Gochain. It tells you that here we're talking about a very important point. This idea of Gochain, that it starts by not feeling totally proud. It starts with a small thing. Then we have the Tanya, that whole vert, Heyei Beinecha Kirosha, which is the beginning of Tanya. That's how important it is, straight at the beginning. Now look at Pirkei Avos. The first mission in Pirkei Avos. Moshe Kibul Torah Misinai, and then it goes further, and then it says three things. What are the three things? It says, V'amid Tamidim Harbe, have Mesunim Badin, V'amid Tamidim Harbe, V'su Siog L'Teira. Wow. It starts from Moshe Kibul Torah Misinai. Now think about this for a second. So the first thing we have to know is Moshe Kibul Torah Misinai. Whatever we have in the Torah comes from above. Moshe received it. But you know what? You want to keep it? You want to make sure you're doing the right thing? There's something now that you have to do. You have to make a fence around the Torah. If you want to take that Moshe Kibul Torah that the Eibishter gave to us, and you want it to have all the positive, effective, successful results, the only way is if you're going to make a protective fence around it. And that comes from you. The Chachamim, they made the Siyogim. And Chassidus explains the analogy that this siyagim is like, when you walk into a house and it's all child safety. You can't open the drawer, you go into a car, you can't. These are all child safety measures to make sure the kids stay safe. So it's siyagim, it's locks, it's closed, it's not easy accessible, it's protective fence, that nothing bad should happen, no harm should come to the child. The same thing the Chacham understood, what's in the Shemus Yisrael, how precious our souls are, and how important it is to always be protected from negative influences. So we have to do things that are siyag l'Torah. This reminds me also, I said this also before, the Rebbe said a pshat in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos where it says, "Estakel b'shleisha dvarim ve'en atabo lidei aveira." Look at these three things and you won't even come to the handle of an aveira. So the Rebbe said pshat, doesn't say ve'en atabo la'aveira. We don't want you to peer over the edge of the cliff and by mistake slip and fall over. That's bad. We have all the signs that come before it. It says, danger, danger, do not go here. Rocks falling, whatever the story is. Construction work. The same thing is when it comes to our spiritual lifestyle and protection. And we have all these years of COVID to learn from that too. Look at all the restrictions that were going on just because of infectious situations. Now the same thing is with spirituality. The only way that you make sure not to come to a bad situation is if you set it up in a way that you don't even come to the handle of the problem. Not that we reach the problem. Let's be smart. And that's the message. What the Rebbe says from this Rashi, and why the Torah says the word Gochem, because we want to say that it starts with bent low, and then it goes further. That's the message of the first question in Tanya and the beer of that Maimer Azal, and that's what the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is telling us. All the same thing. And by the way, the Frierdiker Rebbe used to say in the Sichos, and I think I mentioned this before, that, we say, it was the middle of the night in the forest, and you were lost. Frierdiker Rebbe says, nobody was lost in the middle of the night in the forest all of a sudden. This whole story, how he got there. You understand? It didn't start that he was lost in the forest in the middle of the night. First it starts with this, and then there was that. V'chuli, v'chuli. So this is what the lesson of this week's Parsha is. There's a whole explanation in Kabbalah about the Vav of Gochem. We might leave it for another time. And this is the connection to Parshas Parah. I don't want to get into a length. I think we once spoke about it before in Parshas Chukas about the pleasure drive. We have to burn the cow, and then we use the ashes. There's some negative elements of the cow, and there's some positive elements of the cow. The ashes of the cow represent the pleasure drive. That could be rechanneled, reconditioned, refocused. And then there's the things that have to be burnt. So this is very similar to the story, famous story, that when the Alter Rebbe left the Maggid's son, who was called Rebbe Avraham Malach, he told something to the wagon driver. And there's two versions of what he said. He said, "Mit auf schmeißen the Pferd, as on wissen as in Pferd." You have to whip the horses, that the horses should know that the horse is. Und mit auf schmeißen the Pferd, bissel wen uis Pferd. And you have to whip the horses till they'll stop being horses. So, my friends, I mentioned this before. Every one of us has inside of ourselves a horse, or a cow, the paraduma, or I like to call mine a hippopotamus. And we have to deal with it, either in the level of the schmeißen the Pferd, as on wissen Pferd. There's one level that the Alter Rebbe, the doctor, the spiritual doctor, the Rebbe tells you what condition you have and how to overcome it. Just like you have a nefesh b'hamis, you have a nefesh alikis, which is much more powerful. So that's mizol schmeißen the Pferd, amzol wissen as on wissen as in Pferd. You got to know that you have this animal, this horse, or this hippopotamus, or this cow that's in you, and we all have it. But then there's a higher level, that schmeißen the Pferd, asal werden uis Pferd. That means we can rechannel it. You have a personality. What kind of personality do you have? You have charm. You have intellect. You have generosity. Do something with it. Use it and serve Hashem with those aspects, excuse me, of your personality. which means using the ashes of the cow and channeling in the right direction. There's a famous story, and I said this one already also before, but I'll repeat it, because it shows about how the dangers of how it starts with, once the person starts making cheshbonos about whatever it is. Is it so bad? Is it so terrible? It's not so bad. Okay, once you start speaking like that, then who knows where you'll end up. And that is the story. This is printed in Likutei Sichos, Chelik Yud Ches, page 461, about the Rebbe was talking about television, and about how he was speaking to some rabbi, I would gather some modern Orthodox rabbi, and this rabbi innocently told the Rebbe that he has a television in his house, and he watches sermons of preachers to learn how to make better sermons. And the Rebbe said, wow, look at this. It used to be that Jews would run away from anything that had to do with the church. Here, he's bringing the church into his house, and he's learning from it how to make his sermons better. And then he said, same idea, you have to be so careful, because once you start making these rationalizations and justifications and excuses, who knows where it's going to end up. And then he said a famous word, a story. Amol gekommen in Lubavitch, sein Vater Aid, und hat ihm gefragt, a Kunst ist zu sitzen in Lubavitch, vermacht bei sich im Zimmer und seine ehrliche Yid. There was a chassid who lived in Lubavitch, and he was a bit more out of the world, and he had a son who lived in Petersburg. That was a very modern cosmopolitan city at that time, and obviously the son became much more chilled out, so to speak. So the son came to Lubavitch, which was more like a village with goats and chickens, etc. And he comes to his father, he says, it's a big deal to be a good Jew in Lubavitch, in Petersburg, und gehen in Gas, und dann nicht sündigen, das ist eine Sache. If you're in Petersburg, and you're walking in the streets, and you don't sin, that's something, that's an accomplishment. Sagt weiter, das ich noch nicht kein Kunst. Sein in Petersburg, reingehen in Theater, und sitzen mit vermachten Augen, und nicht sündigen, das ist eine Sache. So he continues, and you think that's something, just walking in the streets? No. Being in Petersburg, walking into the theater like Broadway, going into the theater and sit there with closed eyes and not sinning, that's an accomplishment. Then he goes weiter, und das ist nicht genug, that's still not enough. Sitzen in a Peterburger Theater mit offenen Augen und dann nicht sinnigen. To go walk into the theater with your eyes open, you're staring at what's the show, and then not to sin. Das ist that's something. Then he goes up to weiter. Das ist noch echt nicht genug. That's still not enough. Reingehen in Theater, zugehen non zu dem Stage, Bima. Having a back seat is not the real way. That's no kunst. That's no trick to remain holy. You have to get a box seat, up front, sitting close, with the Artisten spielen, with the artists, the players, the actors, the actresses are all doing their roles. Und dann in Sündigen, and then not to sin, oh, das ist eine große Sache. That's a big accomplishment. Und als hat ausgerechnet der ganze Zettel, he continued speaking in such a vein, man kann sich schon allein vorstellen, you can imagine yourself, wie sagt, Cheshbon kommt verführende Menschen in Sheol Tachlis. You could realize how such a reckoning could bring a person to the abyss. So my friends, the lesson from Pashas Parah is that we have to remember there's a Parah in every single one of us. And that's the lesson that Rebbe teaches us over here about the snake. We have to be proud, and we have to be proactive in our Yiddishkeit, with a passion, with a life, with a spirit, and be on guard. And the Jew lives his life in such a way that nothing is just glottic. Everything he thinks, is this the right thing? Is this not the right thing? And when every single choice that he makes, he realizes whether it's going to bring him up or whether it's going to bring him down. We have to remember the Alter Rebbe's teachings. There's a reason the Alter Rebbe wrote a Tanya. Mamish. We have to realize it's no joke. So the Alter Rebbe is telling us this is like one of the main principles. Remember Gochoin. This is the center of the whole Torah. And this is Shemini. This is the answer. This is the juice. This is the essence of everything. That if you will do your part, then you'll get everything. You'll go Mechail Choil, Pischli Kechudish HaMachad, V'neftem Kepischli Shel Ulam, V'yiskadishtem, v'yisim kedoshim, odem mekadosh atzmim matmo mato, mekatshene yisahar mo mailo. Everyone can reach great heights and success in wherever he wants to reach, in serving Hashem and being a good person, being a better person, and going from height to height. And if we go in such a way, we'll definitely bring straight from Parshas Parah, Shabbos Mevarchim Chedesh Nisan. Every single one of us will merit Nisim Gluyim, Ki Mitzeis Chameretz Mitzrayim, Aren Refois, Begula Mitzvah Shleima, Take of Miad Mamish. Posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisborech, your man in Melbourne.